This week, an Iranian court issued its first death sentence linked to these protests. Human rights groups warn that authorities may plan hasty executions with at least 20 other people currently facing charges punishable by death. Kaveh Shahrooz is a lawyer and human rights activist. He's in Toronto. Kaveh Shahrooz, I'd like to start with what we're seeing today in many Iranian cities. Protests are actually intensifying. Why do you think that is?
Well, a couple of reasons. The immediate reason is that this is the third anniversary of a protest that occurred in 2019, where 1,500 people were killed on the streets of Iran. So that's been the basis of people coming out on the streets again. And they've, organizers have called for 3 days of protests. But really, the main reason why the protests are intensifying is that the people have needs that are not being met by the regime, and their need really is that they want the regime overthrown. The regime has responded with nothing but brutality, like detention, handing down a death sentence, the anger is continuing to build, and I don't think it will stop until, as I mentioned, the regime is overthrown by the protesters. Okay,
I want to build on that death sentence that you mentioned, because a Tehran court has issued a death sentence in connection with the protest, but there is also this confusion about reports. We even saw the Prime Minister tweet about it, about death sentences, for 15,000 people that have been arrested. Clear this up for us. Why was there so much confusion on that?
Sure. Yeah, the confusion is because Iran has announced that it has about 15,000 people detained as a result of these protests. And now I suspect that that's actually an underestimate. Mm-hmm. And we had a number of members of parliament of Iran, an overwhelming majority actually, take a vote and ask the judiciary to come down very hard on these protesters by giving them death sentences. That's sort of the basis of this. But so far, thankfully, only, I don't know if you can say thankfully, but only one death sentence has been announced. Iran's judiciary is not independent. I'm sure that defendant was not given due process or proper access to counsel. But thankfully, the number is not 15,000, but there has been some confusion about this. I think that number could come to reality if foreign officials don't speak out, if the international community doesn't condemn this very loudly and very forcefully. The Iranian regime has a history of carrying out massacres of thousands of people, and I don't think it would hesitate to do that now unless it was shamed and isolated by the international community and told to think again before it tries something like that again.
But it's still the kind of language that leads to this sort of confusion, right? From the parliament, from the armed forces, and others saying show no leniency on these people that have been arrested. So when you look at the 15,000 or maybe more, as you seem to believe, who are in custody, what potentially awaits them as the punishment is meted out?
Yeah, unfortunately, detention in Iran is already pretty horrific. I am sure a large number of those people are already being tortured. And some of them, I regret to say, will probably face execution. This is a regime that knows nothing but bloodshed, that knows nothing but brutality, and it will attempt to show its power, or it'll attempt to demonstrate its strength by trying to be violent towards the protesters as a way of scaring them. What we've seen, though, in the past couple of months is that no matter how hard the regime tries, the people are undeterred because they're so angry, because this regime has been so awful to them for 4 decades, and they want nothing less than the absolute destruction of the Islamic Republic.
Do you think they can get that? I mean, as you mentioned, it's 2 months now. It's about 60 days of protests in the face of increasingly aggressive pushback from the regime, but the people seem undeterred. What do you think is the next stage here?
Yeah, I suspect these protests are going to continue. They will ebb and flow. The next few days will probably be intense protests. They may die down for a little while and pick back up. I frankly don't see any way back for the Islamic Republic. I think any talk of fixing this regime, reforming this regime, all of that is over. The revolutionaries, who I think comprise the majority of the Iranian people, are very clear in their demand. They want, they keep saying death to the dictator, death to the Islamic Republic. For years now, they have been calling for democracy and protection of human rights, things that the Islamic Republic can't possibly give them. And so I think we will see this protest movement continue until such time that the regime eventually collapses.
Dictators tend not to have retirement plans, though, right? As you're saying, death to the dictator, death to the Islamic Republic. No. The protesters don't seem undeterred, but given the lack of options available to the regime, and these pronouncements about no leniency on the people they've arrested, how concerned are you of a truly violent crackdown and backlash if they truly are facing overthrow?
Yeah, that's obviously a concern. And I think this is one of those places where the opposition has to be very smart in what they do. The opposition at the moment is not united, but I hope that the opposition, both inside and outside the country, will become more united and will begin to send out the message that if security forces and if armed forces put down their weapons, if they refuse to carry out orders, then they will be given amnesty. I think that's really the best shot that Iran's opposition has, is to have these forces break off from the regime. The regime will want to carry out brutality, but if the opposition plays its cards right, hopefully the people that are asked to carry out those orders won't do so.
We've seen the Canadian government, multiple rounds of sanctions have been imposed. It's now barring some top regime officials from entering the country. What more would you like to see Canada do?
Well, I think the Prime Minister and his government have been moving in the right direction after many years of not doing what the activists had asked for. I was happy to hear that folks are being barred from entering the country, but I think there are members of the IRGC that are already in this country. Their families are here, their assets are here. I think it's really important that we identify those and make Canada inhospitable for them. And the activist demand for a long time has been the complete listing of the IRGC as a terror group. Now that's that entails some difficulty because there are certain people that are forced to serve in the IRGC, but I think we can probably carve them out through smart drafting of legislation. But it's really important that the entirety of the IRGC be listed as a terror group so that its networks can be discovered and all of it can be outlawed. I mean, the IRGC is nothing short of a violent terror group, and it should be recognized as such.
Okay, Kaveh Shahrooz, always great to talk to you. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much.